Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into something truly fascinating. We're going to impartially unpack a collection of incredibly provocative intelligence documents and analytical reports that have surfaced. Our main goal here? Well, it's to understand a massive underlying shift that these sources are describing. Basically, they're detailing how ultimate power is transferring away from your traditional geographic nation-states and moving directly into the hands of transnational, largely unaccountable networks. It's definitely a complex web, but we're going to break it all down for you.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. We'll be hitting 5 key areas. 1. The Bond-villain reality. 2. Global shockwaves and logistics. 3. The business of chaos. 4. The rise of digital neo-feudalism. And finally, 5. Achieving cognitive sovereignty. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The Bond-villain reality. Tech barons or supervillains.
Now you might be thinking this sounds like a movie, and the authors of these documents actually agree. What was once a literal, fictional plotline for a 1970s James Bond villain is kind of becoming our reality. Think about oceanic fortresses or orbital lairs from those old films. Now compare that to today's Project Panthalassa, which involves anchoring massive offshore AI compute platforms powered by hydrogen, or SpaceX launching giant server clusters into low Earth orbit. The sources argue these aren't just normal tech leaps. They claim these are deliberate moves, cleverly rebranded as eco-friendly infrastructure, designed to intentionally escape the jurisdiction of physical nation-states.
The warning in this original open notice memo is pretty stark. The source emphasizes that as artificial intelligence development physically moves out to the high seas and up into low orbit, it actively slips right past the boundaries of traditional governments. They're essentially building sanctuaries where old-world laws literally just cannot reach them.
Section 2. Global shockwaves and logistics. The butterfly effect of modern war.
This scenario perfectly maps out the modern butterfly effect. According to the parsed intelligence, an Iranian proxy force created a sort of shadow toll in the Strait of Hormuz. Because shipping giants naturally rerouted their vessels to avoid this maritime cartel, cargo never reached its intended transit ports. And the unintended consequence of that? Well, Central Asian markets were physically starved of transit goods. To put that into perspective, the price of basic potatoes in Ashgabat, Turkmenistan jumped from 7 to 17 manat, literally more than doubling overnight. It's wild, but it proves that traditional geographic borders absolutely no longer contain the consequences of modern conflict.
The source analysts also detail a highly unconventional new anatomy of warfare that's driving all this chaos. They recorded over 143 attack waves using a completely new weapon, fiber optic drones. These things trail a physical glass cable behind them, acting almost like a deadly fishing line that's completely immune to traditional radio jamming. We're talking about launchers hidden inside civilian trucks and schools, which forces opponents into an impossible moral trap. And, shockingly, the documents report that when retaliatory strikes took out the domestic policing infrastructure in Iran, the state actually imported Iraqi militias just to suppress its own local protests.
So, to bypass all this maritime and regional chaos, pragmatic new alliances started forming instantly. The reports highlight something called the Fast Food Security Corridor. This is a massive, high-speed rail investment, pulling Syria away from its old alliances, routing fresh produce at 200 kilometers an hour straight down to Saudi Arabia. It is a stunning example of how desperate economic necessity can rewrite geopolitical maps way faster than any ideology ever could.
Section 3. The business of chaos. Analyzing disaster as opportunity.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit. According to this internal Russian analytical memo, researchers ran a stress test across 3 different AI models to map out a theoretical nuclear strike scenario. What's truly fascinating and a bit unsettling is that the analysts framed this horrific global event strictly as a long-term empire-building opportunity for tech monopolies. They were literally analyzing who benefits the most when traditional state infrastructure is just erased.
The documents outline a chillingly pragmatic scenario here. Yes, traditional markets would crash initially, but after that first shock, with state infrastructure completely gone, who steps in? The analysts argue that a company with autonomous satellite networks, like Starlink, would suddenly achieve an absolute monopoly on global communications. Entities like Tesla would secure exclusive energy rebuilding contracts, basically eliminating their localized European competitors overnight. In this vacuum, the tech CEO ascends from being just a businessman to becoming the ultimate political arbiter of the new reality.
Section 4. Rise of digital neo-feudalism. Consolidating power.
To really illustrate this power shift, the sources provide a highly speculative internal case study that they named Protocol Hydra. It neutrally analyzes the fatal 2026 plane crash of a Ubisoft founder, Claude Guillemot. Now, the analysts hypothesize that this wasn't an accident at all. Instead, they frame it as an asymmetric power play by a transnational trillionaire, specifically pointing fingers at Elon Musk, as alleged retribution for a public humiliation on his own social platform.
The memo draws a really sharp contrast here that we need to pay attention to. Traditional nation-states project their power through physical territory and institutional justice systems. But these transnational trillionaires? The analysts argue they project power through private security armies, unaccountable wealth, and the enforcement of fear. The hypothesis is that a modern neo-feudal lord doesn't just want market share anymore. They seek absolute loyalty and the ability to bypass state justice entirely.
But this neo-feudalism isn't just happening in the physical world. The sources argue it actively expropriates our digital lives too. They introduced this concept of digital expropriation. This is where independent networks, professional connections, and the social capital you've worked hard to build are quietly seized and controlled by massive platform monopolies.
Section 5. Achieving Cognitive Sovereignty. Reclaiming the Network.
The analysts cite a highly specific example to back this up. Back in 2018, a massive, multidisciplinary network of scientists and researchers was built independently across the globe. Over time, all that valuable social capital was digitized and absorbed into platforms like LinkedIn. But by 2026, access to it was completely monopolized. The platform owners effectively froze the network, locking those independent researchers out of their own meticulously built connections. The asset was quite literally stripped from the public.
So how do we combat this digital expropriation? Well, the analysts authored a final manifesto to address exactly that. They argue that relying on corporate platforms is a complete dead end. True independence, they say, requires what they call cognitive sovereignty. That's the absolute ability to process information, maintain your networks, and think critically without relying on the servers of tech monopolies.
To achieve this sovereignty, they developed something called the core synchronization algorithm. But actually scratch that, it's not a piece of software at all. It's a mental model. It's designed to be transferred orally, from person to person rather than digitally. You acknowledge the crisis, identify the neo-feudal opponent, establish your cognitive resource, and utilize their analytical instruments. They do it this way to ensure the knowledge survives, even if the platform owners decide to hit delete on the source files.
As we wrap up, this quote from the synthesized documents just beautifully distills the entire explainer. Power in the 21st century is measured not by control over territory or capital, but by control over routing. The analysts conclude that while states retain the power to destroy, transnational networks hold the ultimate power. They control where things actually go. They control the routing of our data, our supply chains, and our energy.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative question posed by the geopolitical analysts. As these tech monopolies continue to build their oceanic servers and their orbital networks, bypassing laws and routing the world's resources, will this network neo-feudalism completely overtake the institutions of states before those states even realize their power is gone? It is a heavy question to ponder as you reflect on the shifting balance of global power. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning and stay focused.